guys, Dani here with Summer Skye Gardens. Welcome back to my channel. If you're a returning viewer, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for watching my videos. I really appreciate you guys. If you are new, I own a flower farm in Splendora, Texas. It's right northeast of Houston in Zone 9B. And I am here inside the farmhouse today. We just made it through our winter storm for the year, probably. We had multiple days where it got super, super cold, and they were anticipating across the south a lot of ice. I know a lot of people up north got more snow than typical, and in the south we were supposed to get a lot of ice. It wasn't quite as bad as they had predicted, at least in my area, which is awesome. And it's better to be over prepared and plan for the worst and then have it not be as bad. But basically, today is Tuesday. Last week on Friday, me and my husband, he came out to help me. We covered up really all the plants because I knew at some point over the weekend it was probably going to drop into the teens. And there's some flowers that really cannot handle that low of a temperature that I'm growing right now. So it was just easier. And some would probably be like iffy, some would probably be fine, but it was just easier for us to come out and just cover the whole beds because I have a mix of flowers out here. And so we, between all the fields, I think we covered like 20 beds. And then I covered like a little bit of my tulips because I have some tulip blooms and I was just wanting to like be sure that they didn't get messed up. But yeah, it took a couple of hours for him and me to do it, but we got it done. And then pretty much I've left them covered over the weekend. I came out yesterday to peek on things and everything looked good, but it was still really cold yesterday, really cold last night, and we had a pretty good frost this morning. So I didn't want to uncover anything yesterday. But today it's warmed up a little bit. It's like in the 40s. It's sunny. So I know that I want to pull back a lot of the fabric and check on the flowers, see if anything needs water today. It is going to freeze again tonight for a few hours. So there is some flowers that I still want to keep covered. And then there's some other flowers that I can go ahead and uncover because it's only supposed to get down to like 27, 28 degrees. And there's definitely stuff out here that can handle being uncovered. And this way I can kind of uncover some stuff, water some stuff today, and then finish out the rest tomorrow. So I wanted to just show you guys how things look, how everything fared, and talk to you about how to protect your plants in the winter when you're going to get a frost or a freeze, especially when you live in the south like me and it doesn't happen very often. And I don't have any kind of like low or high tunnels. I grow everything out in the field. And then kind of just talk you through what flowers are more cold hardy than others, where can you find all of that information, and how things have fared for me over the last few years. So I hope this video is helpful. If you have any questions, drop them below, and I'm going to put on a sweatshirt and let's head outside.
All right, first thing I'll show you guys, all of these crates have my tulips and some of the daffodils, and they all did great. These tulips were all, I basically covered these for a couple of nights and then uncovered. This crate is starting to have bulbs, so I was a little iffy, starting to have blooms, sorry. So I was a little iffy on if these could handle such cold temperatures. Usually tulips are fine in the cold, they can handle snow, but I didn't know with like the ice we were supposed to get, which didn't happen, but they were fine. And everything that I left uncovered was fine. So there's just a reason to not, really baby tulips and daffodils. They can usually handle pretty cold temperatures.
All right, so this area behind me is all of my chrysanthemums. They are perennial here where I live. So I overwinter them in the ground, and then usually by February, they're starting to send up new growth that I can take for cuttings. I have definitely overwintered them before, and they can handle some freezing temperatures, but once again, This was the first year I've had them like this in the ground where we were supposed to get really cold temperatures and a lot of ice. So I went ahead and covered them, but I will say that there was a few mums that I grow at my house that I did not cover, and they were fine. So I think in general, mums can handle a lot colder temperatures than we think. But basically everything that I covered, I used frost cloth and I double covered it. When you're looking up options for frost cloth, you can look up either, you know, the zone that it's hard, that it'll well, not really the zone. It'll give you a temperature that says that it will cover to, or it'll give you like so many degrees of protection of warmth. And a lot of times it'll say, oh, this cloth will give you an extra 4 to 5 degrees of warmth, or this cloth will protect your plants down to 27 degrees. So with this cloth, it was supposed to be like 5 degrees of protection. So I double covered. So I got 10 degrees, and I figured between all of the cold hardy plants that I grow, you know, pretty much double covering everything should cover my bases. It is DeWitt DeWitt frost cloth that I order off of Amazon. I just order a big roll of it and lay it out and cut it, and then when it's time to pull it up and store it, I just put it in bins, and that's kind of it. And I pin it down with landscape staples. I know some people will use rocks or bricks. The biggest thing with the frost cloth is you want to make sure that it touches all the way down to the ground so that none of the cold air can kind of come in underneath the blanket. If you can have it not touch the plants on the top, that's great. But I just don't have enough hoops, and a lot of my plants are still kind of little at this point. So there was a few things I put hoops over to lift the frost cloth up, but otherwise a lot of the frost cloth we just lay, you know, directly on the plants. In general, covering plants for a frost or a freeze, frost cloth is great. You can use blankets, sheets, towels. You don't want to put plastic directly on the plants. Plastic will transfer the temperature way too easily. So it'll transfer cold and it'll transfer heat and burn your plants, especially if the plastic is on as the sun starts to come up and it warms up. That plastic will heat up really quickly and will burn your plants. Now, if you're expecting a lot of like rain, sleet, ice, snow, and you want to use plastic to keep all the blankets and things from, you know, getting soaked, then lay out your cloth or your blankets and put plastic on top of that so the plastic is not directly touching the plants. All right, so I'll turn it around right here so you can see these 3 beds laid out there. This bed is only planted halfway down, so that's why that frost cloth back there is kind of flopped up. But let's come over here and start to pull this back. I'm actually going to take this frost cloth all the way off today because these mums can handle the colder temperatures tonight. And I just ripped that. I'm going to have to put the camera down and pull it up with 2 hands.
All right, so I got one bed uncovered, and you can see here they are perfectly fine. Here is some of the new growth popping up. The, you know, top of the plants had already kind of died back some, and them dying back with some previous freezes is fine. But what I really wanted to make sure was okay was this new growth coming in at the bottom, and they all look totally fine. So I'm going to keep them uncovered tonight and then come through and water them really good tomorrow. All right, guys, it is now Wednesday. I was not able to film a lot more yesterday because I was running out of time and I really needed to get as much done as possible. I was able to remove the fabric off a few beds and get a few watered, but pretty much today, especially now that it's about 40 degrees and the frost has melted, I am going through and uncovering everything, and I'm gonna get everything nice and deeply watered, and then probably leave most stuff uncovered until Saturday. We will have like a very light freeze/frost tonight. And then Thursday night, Friday night, I think it's supposed to be above freezing, above frost level. And then Saturday night, drop down into the mid-20s again. So tonight I may just recover my straw flower because that seems to be the most sensitive flower to freezing temperatures. And then on Saturday, may just cover the straw flower and a few of my like younger seedling beds. So just kind of see it's a day-to-day process. But right here behind me in the U-pick, I have my bed of newly planted Lisianthus and a bed of baby snapdragons. Snapdragons are usually more cold hardy. They can handle like upper 20s, so like a light freeze, but because these are babies, I decided to go ahead and cover them just to be on the safe side. Once they get more established, you could probably leave them uncovered for a light freeze. And then the Lisianthus, they like the cold temperature, but I always cover them if it's gonna freeze just to be on the safe side, especially because they are so expensive. But let me go get them uncovered and I'll show you how they look, and I'm gonna give them a nice good watering. All right, I got the staples up on this bed, but I was gonna show y'all, so this frost blanket is still pretty wet because of the frost that melted. So what I'm gonna do is pull these out, and I pretty much do these on all the frost blankets, is I pull them out, I stretch them out, and I let them dry out in the sun before I put them up. You don't want to put them up when they're wet because they will grow mold. So let the sun help dry them out. Wait till they're fully dry before you store them. You can probably just, you know, leave them out in the field for a day or two if you need to. All right, overall, these look great. These are all the baby snapdragons. This is my rocket mix for the U-pick field. And then here's the Lisianthus. These also look great. And I was definitely more cautious this year with Lisianthus because I had some issues this past year with transplanting, having some die with some freezing temperatures. So I'm definitely babying these so I can have a really good crop of Lisianthus this year. So let me get these guys watered and we'll move on to the other field. All right, here we are with the first production field. So over on this side is the straw flower. And as you can see, the plants as a whole should be okay, but they did sustain some frost damage or freeze damage. So I'm gonna give them a good watering and see how they recover. But of all the spring flowers I grow, straw flower definitely tends to be the most tender to damage. Here is the mint that I am overwintering from this past year, and it looks fine. I actually uncovered this yesterday and it was fine. Same over here with the Tweedia, which is this stuff. Have a little bit of other mint growing, and then back there's the Azuratum, which I had cut back. This bed is all baby stock, which you can see some of them look fine. Some of them look rough, and this was an issue before the freezing temperatures came in. I'm not really sure what the deal is. I know they got dried out over the last couple of days of still being covered. I did water them yesterday, so we'll just have to see how many survive and keep going. And stock may be on the cutting list this year. Even though I love it, the last couple of years I've had too many end up dying. Here's some more baby straw flower. And then this bed is baby snapdragons. I uncovered these yesterday and gave them a good watering. Overall, they look good. So I have these here and these in this bed. So I'll be leaving these uncovered for now, but Let me get everything a good watering, and then we'll go back and look at the production field number 2. Okay, so here is my second production field, and I'm out of breath. I had to take my sweatshirt off because it warmed up some. I just uncovered everything and laid out all the fabric so that it can dry out. So I'm going to go through and water and kind of look through all of the plants. Pretty much everything looks good other than the stalk. Some of the stalk looks like it was damaged from the freeze, and some of it looks like it's damaged from not having water since Friday when it rained. So what I'm gonna do is I'll give everything a nice good deep watering, give it a couple days. It's Wednesday. I'll kind of see how things look Friday to Saturday. I'm not gonna rip anything up obviously, but I don't know, that one might be a goner. But we'll just see. So let me turn the camera around and I'll show you all the different plants. All right, so let's go over here first. So this is Green Mist Ami. And you can see where some of the tops were a little frost damaged, but otherwise it looks fine. And I fully think that this will bounce right back. Kind of same with the little bit of dill that I planted. And a really funny thing, because last year I grew Bupleurum here, is I think I'm getting a lot of volunteer Bupleurum seedlings. And I don't know if that's because it was cold and wet and I had this covered and now they've all germinated, but I will take them because they are hard to start by seed. I've not had good success direct sowing them, but who knows, they threw seed last year and now they're growing. This plant is mignonette. It's more of like a wildflower, so it usually does good in a freeze. And I wouldn't have covered it except I covered just the whole bed. I had a few Bells of Ireland that I was able to start. They look a little rough, but I would think they'd bounce back. And then over here is, I believe this is Scabiosa. So some of them look rough, some of them look fine. To me, it looks more like it's probably a combination of more of a water issue, maybe a little bit of a freeze issue. Hi, Pumpkin. You happy to be outside? Okay, let's go to the next bed. Snapdragons. They all look great. They always do really well. Over here, we have Larkspur, which would be fine in a freeze. I had some Persian cress here. This is pretty much all dead. It was on its way out before the freeze. Up here, I had Bupleurum. Looks great. And these were all plugs that I had ordered. And then up here is my Emerald Beads cress, which does way better for me than Persian cress. The only reason I planted Persian cress is because I had the seed and I wanted to try it one more time, but it sucks for me, so I will not be growing that again. This bed is Snapdragons, which look great. And then Campanula, which I'm growing for the first time. I ordered plugs. That looks awesome. And then in the back, and this next bed is all status. And you can see it does have freeze damage. This always happens. And it could definitely use some water. So once I get these watered, they'll be just fine. But this happens every year. Some of the outer leaves get freezer burned and then they're fine. And then this last bed over here is some more of the campanula. And then the stock, which looks like crap. So these ones in the back were uncovered. And then the ones that were covered really don't look that much better. And I definitely think this is freezer damage or freeze damage. And then I also think it's from not watering for several days. But we'll see how these look after a deep watering, after a couple of days, but I'm not really counting on much from these right now. All right, last area I'll show you guys is where I have all my anemones and ranunculus planted and a handful of daffodils. So I had these 3 beds mostly covered, these 2 uncovered, because whatever I planted or didn't plant here has not come up other than a few random ranunculus. And I will say that not covering them, they look perfectly fine. So I think that just goes to show how hardy ranunculus are. Here is the bed I covered. I did notice that the butterfly ranunculus tend to be a little more susceptible to frost damage. I think this is one right here, than like the regular ranunculus, but overall they look fine. And then the anemones, of course I covered this bed, but then there was a few toward the back, like a little chunk that I didn't cover, and they look totally fine. So I think in the future, yeah, I'm just not going to worry about really covering them unless it's, you know, in the teens for a long time. So I'm going to give all these a really good drink of water. And we've got our first bloom here. Hello, friend. Of course, the first blooms are always super short, but that's exciting. They're going to start to bloom, I think, a little bit earlier this year. One other quick thing I wanted to talk about and show you guys is how I winter prep the irrigation. So we have a well on the farm that we use to water all of the flowers, or most of the flowers. I also use a little bit of the city water from the house for specifically the mums because they're right next to the house, but everything else comes from the well. So when it's going to freeze more than like a few hours or like freeze colder temps, I come in and I drain the well. I don't necessarily cover it right now because it just hasn't gotten that cold. It's usually good enough to just drain it. And then I come in, I disconnect all the hoses from the spouts, and then I wrap the spouts up in a towel and a trash bag. All right, so the way my well is set up in most wells is you're going to have a pump which helps bring water up into the main compartment, and it's hooked up to the electricity right here. So if I want to drain my well, I need to turn the pump off or else it'll just start continuously pumping water back in. So all I do is I come out here to the breaker and I just turn off the breaker for the well. And then this is a sand trap. So before I had this put in, I would just open the valve here and let all the water out. But instead, I come over here and I just turn, sorry, I made a little friend today. I just turn this valve and all the water comes pouring out with the sand out of the sand trap and then out of the well and kind of drains this whole system. And I just leave it like that. And then any piping coming out of the ground, like right here, I will cover. And like I said, any of the spouts coming out of the ground. Like for the other areas, I will just cover the pipe with a towel and a trash bag, and then once the freeze is passed, I take it off, I hook everything back up, and then if I want to get the well back up and running, all I do is just close this valve, and then I turn the pump back on. I give it about 20 minutes and it will start pumping water back into the system. And then when I go to turn on the irrigation, like at one of the field areas over here, it'll just take a little bit for it to fill up the piping underneath and to come out, and then we'll be good to go. Now, when I used drip irrigation, what I would do is just, turn the hoses off and then, and wrap the piping. I would disconnect the irrigation and try to drain some of the water out, but I didn't worry about it too much just because it doesn't get so cold here so often. But I do know some people in colder climates, they will come through with like a special blower and blow the water out of their irrigation lines, which I think can definitely help. I don't know if it's necessary all the time. I just don't have any experience with that. I have heard of some people where they don't do that, and every once in a while they'll have a line break or bust and they just go in and replace it, and usually that's not too hard with a lot of drip irrigation systems. So but now that I'm not using irrigation, I don't have to worry about that. I just make sure I put up all my sprinkler heads and like the nozzles that go on the hoses, because I have had those crack before when they're left outside in a freeze. So I'll just gather them all up and put them in the shed and they'll be fine. All right, guys, so I have gone through and checked everything now on the farm. It is 11:52, so that took me all morning to get everything uncovered and watered. I'm just watering the anemones and ranunculus right now with the sprinkler, so it can water over the next, hour or two while I eat and take a shower. There's a few things I just wanted to leave you with about frost and freeze protection, especially when you live in a hotter climate like me, and these kind of temperatures are not the norm and you might get them unexpectedly. Have some kind of protection plan in place way before you will need it. Case in point, right now, I wanted to order another roll of frost cloth because I have some old pieces that I was like putting together that were small. So I want to throw those away and just get some, nice new big strips for the beds. And right now it's sold out on Amazon where I ordered it. Or if you want to order it, it's a lot more expensive. So buy it in the off season, calculate how much you'll need to fully cover your beds. You want to be prepared to cover the whole bed because year to year, what you plant may change, where things go or what you grow. So just be prepared to cover the whole bed. Have it tucked away, and then, have enough either landscape staples or rocks or bricks or whatever you want to hold it down with. Have all that ready to go. So if it's, 80 degrees one day and they're telling you, hey, this weekend we're getting a cold front and it's going to drop down to 20 degrees, you're not like going out and panic buying everything. In your general zone, you should know about when your first frost or freeze is going to happen and maybe how often it happens. But now if you're farming or gardening, that's definitely something you're going to want to pay attention to year. Remember, when you do go to cover stuff, always use some type of fabric and not plastic. If you're going to use plastic for like a water protection, you need to put some sort of fabric underneath on the plant so that the plastic does not directly touch the plant. If you're going to use hoops, make sure the protection is, all the way to the ground. I know there's a lot of people out there that use low tunnels where they can just kind of raise the sides up and down. So that's always something you could look into if you're getting frequent frosts or freezes. For me, only having to do this once or twice a year, it's just not worth it for me to build out a low tunnel and have it be there like all the time. It's also not really useful for me to have a high tunnel, but of course you'll see people up north have high tunnels so they can get things going in there earlier, have them be protected from the cold and kind of, get things up and running quicker. But don't ask me questions on tunnels or high tunnels. I am not
I don't have any experience on that, nor do I plan to get one anytime soon. I grow everything in the field and cover it if I need to out in the field. Remember also that everything you grow has an optimum climate, and that could be whether it's cold or hot outside. So really get to know your local climate and figure out what is going to grow well in your climate. And every plant has a cold hardiness like level. So you can either look up the zone that it's cold hardy down to or the temperature. And that'll kind of guide you if you should be covering something. When in doubt, if you have the time and the manpower to cover it, go ahead and cover it. It's not going to hurt anything, especially if you can uncover it quickly and get those plants watered. Ideally, you don't want to leave things covered for more than a couple of days, but as you can see today, I had stuff covered for 5 days and most stuff was fine. So if you have to do it, and I would have ideally uncovered and recovered, but I didn't have the time or the manpower. So I just let it go. I peeked at the plants. They seemed fine. I let it go till today, and they, for the most part, were fine. Yeah, so you'll know, what you need to cover, what you don't, and try to grow stuff that is optimum for your climate. So you're not struggling with, battling the elements. There's some stuff here because I have to worry more about how hot it gets where I live and not how cold it gets. There's some stuff that I don't grow here because it just gets too hot. And instead of trying to battle the heat and keep them shaded or water them down or run a fan or, whatever, I'm just not going to worry about growing that kind of stuff. So same thing goes with the cold. If you live in a colder climate, either try to work with when you can plant stuff to grow it, or don't grow things that are tropical or a warmer climate in your winter if you cannot provide that kind of climate for them over the winter. In the South, in a warmer climate, most cold flowers are going to do better if you plant them in the fall, kind of right when it starts to cool off a little bit. Plant them in the fall, overwinter them so they have plenty of time to enjoy the mild, coolish winter that we get. They can, hang on to those days where it's cold and then enjoy the days where it's a little bit on the warmer side. And then they will spring up come, February, March, and April once it really starts to warm up here. Colder environments, they don't plant stuff in the fall. They wait until late winter or early spring to get stuff up and running. If you're confused about when to get things going in your particular climate, try to find someone who grows in the same kind of climate, the same kind of area you do. But for any of y'all that are in a 8, 9, 10, 11, milder winters, hotter summers climate, I plant everything in the fall. I have a video on everything I was growing and when to plant. I will link that below if you want to check it out. But I am prepared to have blooms coming up in the next few weeks and to have all of these cold flowers going, some of them through the end of May. I will also link below the products that I use. The landscape fabric, the staples, and especially my new watering wand, which I absolutely love. I got that off Amazon. I've been wanting a rainfall wand, and I haven't really found the best one, but this one I did. I love it, especially for watering seedlings or newly planted transplants out in the field. It's very gentle, but puts out a crap ton of water. So I will link all those below if you want to check them out. For the frost cloth, most people use either Agribon or DeWitt. You can find both of those on Amazon. I've used both. They're both great. So I think it's just, price, how much you need, if it's available on, whether you can get it or not. So I hope I covered as much as I could and showed you guys, how things look. But if you have any questions, feel free to drop those below, and I will see y'all in my next video.